Growing up, life was a constant cycle of change due to my father's military career. We moved often, each new base offering a fresh start but never a true home. This lifestyle made me adaptable but left me yearning for stability and a place to call my own. Early on, I decided that someday I'd open my own business to plant roots and build something lasting. After college, with degrees in Arabic and computer science, I enlisted in the Army. My language skills landed me a role as a translator in volatile regions of North Africa, where I developed a deep interest in security technology, realizing its importance for both personal and national safety. This experience shaped my post-military goals to combine my technical skills with a mission to create secure environments. After leaving the military, I set out to open a computer and security equipment store in the outskirts of Indianapolis. I envisioned a location near a busy strip mall and ideally between two electronic retail stores. On my second day of searching, I found a vacant storefront with a for lease sign. As I peered into the dim, empty space, the door suddenly swung open, startling me. Two women stepped out, laughing. The taller one said, "Sorry to scare you, we didn't expect to find a peeping Tom in broad daylight." Caught off guard, I chuckled and replied, "Reflex. If I had my rifle, I might have accidentally turned you into Swiss cheese, but I'd hate to hurt two nice ladies." She smirked. "You must be in the military." The shorter woman stepped forward, asking, "Looking to lease?" I nodded. "Yeah, is this place available?" She introduced herself as Linda Carter, the leasing agent, and her friend as Kathy Adams, a banker. I introduced myself as James, and Linda explained that they were finalizing lease terms but hoped more tenants would help lower loan interest rates. When I asked the rent, Linda said, $1, $200 a month plus utilities, and Kathy added that the minimum lease term was 6 months. "How about $1,000 a month for a year, paid up front?" I offered. Linda thought for a moment and then agreed, saying, "That works." She turned to Kathy, noting that I might make a good bank customer. Kathy smiled and handed me her card, adding, "Let me know if you need help." As Linda went to handle the paperwork, I asked Kathy if she'd like to grab lunch afterward. She seemed surprised but agreed. Leading her to my Ford Mustang, I couldn't help noticing her raised eyebrows. "Nice car," she remarked. I smiled. "Thanks. How about you drive us somewhere nice?" She hesitated. "Me? I've never driven a manual before." I shrugged. "No problem. I'll teach you." She slid into the driver's seat, and after a few stalls and some grinding gears, she managed to get us to a bistro near the riverfront. Her focus on shifting was amusing, and I kept calm throughout the bumpy ride. Over lunch, she finally asked, "What made you so jumpy earlier?" I explained that I'd spent the past 2 years in North Africa as an army infantryman and that unexpected doors opening there often meant danger. Since I didn't have my rifle, I was ready to throw my pen at you, I joked, making her laugh. "Why join the army and go to such a dangerous place?" she asked. I told her about my upbringing as the son of a U.S. Army colonel and an Algerian nurse, explaining how my parents met in Algiers before political turmoil escalated there. I grew up as an army brat, earned degrees in Arabic and computer science, and felt both patriotic and restless. The army felt like the right path, and my language skills got me assigned as a translator, I said. She leaned in. "Was it as exciting as you expected? Did you get shot at?" I grinned. "More interesting than I expected. And yes, I was shot once. Maybe after our third date, I'll show you the scar." She laughed, teasing, "Third date? Do I get a say?" I smirked. "If you want to see it on the second date, I'll set aside my modesty." When lunch ended, Kathy insisted on paying. "It's on the bank," she said with a playful smile. On the drive back, she joked, "The girls will be jealous when I pull up in this car." I teased, "Then give them a show. Step out, show some leg, and toss me the keys." She played along, making a theatrical exit and waving before disappearing into the bank. A few minutes later, I called her. "What time should I pick you up for dinner on Saturday?" She teased back, "Who is this?" I laughed. "A guy gives you a ride in his Mustang, and you forget him already?" "James," she exclaimed, "I didn't recognize your voice." 7 works for me. "Dress sharp," she added with a mischievous tone. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. When I picked her up, I complimented her, "You look dazzling. All the guys at the local diner will love seeing you." She smirked. If you take me there, I'll never see your battle scars. I grinned. I've got reservations at Sullivan's Steakhouse for dinner. That work? She nodded, saying, perfect. But do we have time for wine first? Sure. Show me how a successful banker lives, I replied. Laughing, she invited me into her cozy apartment. I'm entry-level successful, aiming higher. I bought this place 2 years ago but haven't invested much in renovations. I noticed her diploma from Purdue and asked her major. Finance, she replied. I smiled. Figures. Fits your career. She nodded. True, but my real dream is real estate development. Banking real estate projects for a few years is the best way to learn. We spent dinner talking about Kathy's college years and her plans for the future. The evening was perfect, filled with good conversation, excellent food, and just the right amount of wine. She asked how my computer skills came into play during my military service. My first combat mission in Tripoli changed everything, I began. We raided a suspected insurgent's house and found some computers my team was ready to destroy. I stopped them, insisting we take the equipment to the intelligence officer. I handed everything to the G2 officer, who smirked and said, "What are we supposed to do with this junk? No one knows how to operate an Arabic system." I told him, "Sir, besides being an interpreter, I can handle a computer in Arabic." I continued, that led to hours at a desk working under the watchful eyes of senior officers. It wasn't long before I identified an imminent attack planned for 0200 the following night. Their letter detailed a 3-pronged assault and even included weapon caches. I outlined the strategy on a map, and the command team quickly organized airstrikes and artillery fire while keeping everything secret to avoid tipping off spies among us. The Air Force struck first, and the rest of us scrambled to our positions. That operation changed my role. From then on, I worked exclusively with confiscated computers, uncovering insurgent bank accounts used to fund weapons, bribes, and salaries. She raised an eyebrow. So you disrupted their money flow? I smiled. It felt like a duty. I even found a way to transfer funds directly. Using my personal laptop, I moved a substantial sum into my Indianapolis bank account, ensuring the enemy couldn't access it. To cover my tracks, I quickly transferred it to a numbered Swiss account. This method was safer than using Army systems, thanks to clearance protocols. I avoided telling her more about that particular income source, though I added, "That's why my book is titled How I Beat the Insurgents Without Leaving My Desk." She laughed and teased, "An interesting person like you must have gotten injured at that desk." Carpal tunnel? I smirked. Sorry, my scars are classified until the second date. We laughed about it on the way to a riverside club, where we spent a couple of hours dancing. When I dropped her off at her apartment, she asked, "Want to come in?" "Yeah, I'd like that," I said, joining her for a glass of wine. Before leaving, I asked, "Was this date good enough for another?" She smiled. "Yes, but only because I need to see those scars." I promised to call her soon. Before I left, she hugged me, then pulled me in for a warm, lingering kiss. On our second date, we had dinner at a jazz bistro before heading to a concert. During intermission, she leaned in and asked, "Are you ready to show me those war wounds?" I teased, "Nope. Maybe when we get back to your place." "Deal," she said with a grin. Later, as we sat in her living room, she asked if I'd ever received a Purple Heart. When I sensed doubt in her voice, I pulled up a picture on my phone showing me in uniform, holding my medal. She seemed satisfied but still curious. Grabbing a small briefcase from my glove box, I said, "No proposals tonight, that's for date 6. But here's the real deal." She opened the case, finding my Purple Heart and reading aloud, "Shell fragment to the right eyelid." I pointed to the faint scar above my eye. "How'd it happen?" she asked, giggling. "A bad egg exploded while I was making an omelet. The medical report says eggshell shard to the eye, but it still earned me a Purple Heart," I said with a laugh. We talked for hours, growing closer by the minute. Weeks later, I hired an office manager, Betty White. She was sharp, experienced, and married to a local police officer. Despite her impressive resume, her previous employer claimed she didn't fit their target market, so she was thrilled to join my team. Life seemed perfect as Kathy and I grew closer, until the day 2 men from the CIA walked into my office. They flashed their badges and asked to speak privately. My chest tightened as they mentioned captured insurgents complaining about an American looting their bank accounts. I stayed silent, fighting back the old anxiety creeping into my mind. They didn't accuse me outright, though their implication was clear. Then came the twist. They wanted me to work for them as a private contractor, offering $220,000 a month. The first $500,000 of any recovered funds will be yours, they said, with the rest funneled to the CIA. We believe you can recover far more than that. The suggestion was obvious: if I refused, they'd investigate my previous operations. By the end of my tour in North Africa, I'd accumulated over $1 million in Swiss accounts and another $300,000 in Indianapolis. The CIA wanted me to keep disrupting insurgent bank accounts. The only hesitation I had was Kathy. When I told her about the offer, she was stunned. $20,000 a month is too good to pass up, she finally said. And so, I agreed. I didn't mention the CIA's bonus program to Kathy. She needed to move out of her apartment, so I invited her to move in with me. I outfitted my home with top-of-the-line security equipment, including hidden cameras, sensors, and remote monitoring capabilities, ensuring it was fully secure. You're welcome to use all of it, I told her. I'll cover the bills while you focus on your career. She hesitated initially, but the convenience eventually won her over. We quickly settled into a routine that felt natural. Before heading abroad again, I planned a schedule to balance my work in North Africa with my time in the States. 3 months there, 3 months here, I explained to Kathy. This way, I can avoid burnout and we'll have consistent time together. She seemed reassured, but I could tell she still had reservations. My first stop was a meeting at Langley with the CIA. They saw me as a hybrid asset, not quite a person, not entirely a machine, but a tool they could use. Their terms were blunt: if I screwed up, the deal was off. If my actions led to civilian casualties or compromised missions, the consequences would be swift and final. Those 3 months in North Africa were grueling. At the command center, I worked tirelessly analyzing insurgent systems, extracting data that gave the CIA a constant edge. I mapped out connections between insurgent cells, identified hidden supply lines, and even left funds in certain accounts to bait enemy operatives into revealing themselves. Some days, I barely slept, but it was worth it when the results saved lives. Kathy and I spoke every day through FaceTime despite the 9-hour time difference. Seeing her face, even briefly, made the long days bearable. She'd tell me about her meetings at the bank and her growing portfolio of loans, while I'd share vague details of my work, leaving out anything classified. In an effort to maintain my health, I joined the Marines stationed at the compound for morning physical training. At first, they eyed me warily, unsure what to make of an Army brat working for the CIA. But after a few weeks of running, weightlifting, and sparring alongside them, I became part of their group. It was a welcome break from the computer screens and intelligence reports that dominated my days. When the 3 months ended, I met with the senior CIA officer in the region to review my work. "You've exceeded our expectations," he said, glancing over the reports. "The data you've provided is saving lives. Do you want to stay for another stint or head home?" I smiled. "I'm heading back to marry the most beautiful woman in Indiana. I'll return in 3 months, but in the meantime, I've trained your teams on what to capture during raids and created protocols for remote access. From Indianapolis, I'll still be able to extract intel as needed." The officer nodded, pleased with my thoroughness. Back in the States, Kathy greeted me at Indianapolis International Airport with a smile that could light up a city. We had grown closer despite the distance, and it felt like everything was falling into place. I sent her a bouquet of flowers with a note that read, "You're more beautiful than these flowers. Join me for dinner this Saturday, you might want to pick out a new dress." The restaurant was actually the penthouse suite of the Grand Meridian Hotel. I had arranged a romantic dinner on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. A string quartet played her favorite songs as we enjoyed a 5-course meal. The bedroom, hidden from view, was lined with rose petals, and the entire evening was planned down to the last detail. Kathy was curious about where we were going but didn't press me for answers. When the limo pulled up to the hotel, the concierge greeted us warmly and personally escorted us to the suite. Kathy practically floated through the lobby, her joy infectious. Passers-by turned to watch us, probably wondering if we were celebrities. Dinner was perfect: crisp champagne, a molten chocolate dessert, and a flawless view of the skyline. As the final course ended, I lifted a silver plate cover to reveal a small purple velvet box. Kathy gasped, her eyes wide with emotion. Kneeling before her, I opened the box and began my proposal. She whispered yes, but I gently stopped her so I could finish. Will you be my wife? I asked. She laughed through happy tears and said, absolutely. Our wedding was small and intimate since neither of us had large families. We flew to Charleston, South Carolina, for a honeymoon filled with southern charm, complete with horse-drawn carriages and seafood by the waterfront. When we returned, Kathy introduced me to her network of realtors and developers, a group that fascinated me with their business acumen. Balancing my 3-month rotations abroad with our life in Indiana became second nature. On our first anniversary, I surprised Kathy with a question, do you know a realtor who could find us a house? She looked at me, puzzled. What kind of house are you thinking about? I smiled. It's your choice. The only condition is the total cost, including furnishings and remodeling, can't exceed $1 million. She stared at me in disbelief. $1 million? Are you joking? I reassured her, we can afford it. I've made some smart investments over the years. I wanted to make sure you married me for love, not money. She shook her head, called me a jerk, and said, fine, it's a cash deal. Kathy found an incredible deal, a divorcing couple looking to sell quickly. While I was abroad, she oversaw the remodeling and kept me updated through FaceTime. I requested a high-grade security system with hidden cameras and microphones, explaining it was for her safety. In truth, I had received tips that insurgents were growing angrier about their stolen funds, and I couldn't afford to take chances. To add another layer of security, I contacted Tom Leidick, a private investigator recommended by Linda. There are rumors of a bounty on me, I told him during our meeting. I need your help monitoring my wife's activities discreetly. Install a tracker on her car, and I've already embedded a beacon in her phone. If there's any suspicious behavior, I need to know. And if there's any indication she's being coerced or manipulated, I need to protect her. Enemies could try to use her against me. Leidick nodded thoughtfully. This will be expensive, with an upfront fee and monthly charges based on the services performed. I agreed immediately and transferred the money. Despite Leidick's assurances, I felt uneasy. To ease my mind, I decided to start my own investigation. I started with Kathy's closet, meticulously inspecting every shoebox, lifting the shelves, and checking all the pockets in her clothes. I found nothing unusual at first. Then, in the hall closet, I noticed a small travel bag secured with a tiny lock. Picking it open with a paperclip, I discovered a set of French lingerie, cheap clothes, and well-worn shoes that had clearly been washed several times. It was obvious she had been meeting someone. Next, I checked the hidden cameras in the house, replacing their batteries to ensure everything remained operational. In my office, I noticed screwdriver marks on the top drawer of my file cabinet. Someone had rifled through my tax returns and investment information, likely preparing for a divorce. While my offshore and Swiss bank accounts were untouched, the invasion of privacy suggested Kathy was gathering ammunition for alimony negotiations. I checked my weapon safe, which remained locked and untouched. Deciding to confront her subtly, I invited Kathy to dinner. After making reservations, I left her a voicemail and sent a text, also leaving a new dress on the table for her to wear. By 5 p.m., I took a nap, showered, and dressed in my best suit. At 6:15, with no response from her, I checked her cell tracker, which showed her at a high-end office building near her bank. I went ahead to Olive and Finch, a popular restaurant where I'd reserved a secluded table. I ordered a bottle of her favorite wine and tracked her location, which remained unchanged. By 7:20, I ordered soup, noticing the sympathetic looks from nearby diners as I sat alone. At 7:30, my phone vibrated. It was Kathy. "Hi, honey. Please forgive me, James. My phone died, and I couldn't get your messages," she said. "I understand," I sighed. "Will you come to my place for dinner? I'm still here because you said I wasn't attentive enough, and I wanted to make this night special. Are you still coming?" I asked. "Yes, James. I just finished a meeting, but I'll be there in 30 minutes. I'm really sorry," she replied. "Great. You'll be here just in time for dessert and drinks," I said. I had just finished my ribeye steak when Kathy arrived, breathless, her hair disheveled and her blouse wrinkled. "I can't apologize enough, James. You went out of your way to make tonight special, and I ruined it. What can I do to make it up to you?" she asked. Have you eaten? If not, order something, and I'll get dessert. Then you can tell me about your day, I replied. I'm not very hungry, but I heard they have a great triple chocolate brownie here, she said. Order that and a scotch on the rocks, I replied. Once dessert arrived, I asked casually, so, how was your day? She sighed. Hectic. We had an issue with the wording on a mortgage for the shopping center on Meadow Lane. The bank thought we were mortgaging 2 buildings, but the borrowers thought it was just one, she explained. Did it take all day? I asked. No, it started in the afternoon and ran late, she replied. Who was involved in the negotiations? I inquired. Her tone shifted. Why all the questions, James? It was just another day at work, she said, irritated. After you didn't return my calls and texts, leaving me embarrassed waiting here, I think I deserve a little more than just another workday. Am I overstepping? I asked. No, but I don't like being interrogated as if I'm hiding something, she retorted. Are you hiding something, or someone, from me? I asked. No, I'm not, she snapped. Then why so defensive? I'm making small talk. People ask their spouses about their day, including who they worked with. If you think I'm invading your privacy, I'll stop, I replied, trying to diffuse the tension. Don't be so smart, she said. Okay, how about the weather? I thought today was warm for this time of year, I quipped, hoping to lighten the mood. She softened. Fine, I'll play along. No, I didn't leave the office. They brought sandwiches, which I hate, and it probably put me in a bad mood. I'm sorry for snapping at you, she admitted. That's okay, honey. I love you, grumpy or not, I said, trying to reassure her. Dinner was more relaxed after that, as we discussed plans for the weekend. Still, I sensed she was lying about her day. When Kathy went to the bathroom, I glanced at her phone. It was 75% charged, contradicting her earlier excuse about it dying. At home, she immediately took a shower, which was unusual unless she had been outside or meeting someone. The first day of my investigation had been revealing, and I knew it was crucial to appear ignorant. Indiana didn't allow infidelity as grounds for divorce, so I didn't need proof of cheating, only irreconcilable differences. My primary goal was to protect my assets and reallocate my portfolio in Switzerland. Later, Kathy unexpectedly entered my office while I was reviewing my investments. Startled, I quickly shifted focus. What are you looking at? She asked, peering at the screen from a distance. I'm reallocating investments. Deciding between Google and Amazon. Any suggestions? I replied calmly. She ignored my explanation, pointing at the screen. $3, 646, 624, is that your money? There's no name, just numbers. I felt the need to be partly honest. Yes, that's my Swiss bank account. It's money I earned trading goods while I was overseas. She raised an eyebrow. Why don't you transfer that money here so I can spend it? She asked. That money stays in Switzerland to avoid massive taxes. The $1 million you spent on the house and furnishings came from this account. It was my gift to you, I explained. Are there any other accounts I don't know about? She pressed. Yes, I admitted. How many accounts and how much money? She demanded. I smiled. You've used your one honest answer. Frustrated, she jumped into my arms, laughing. Great. Keep surprising me. I need a Ferrari and a bigger house, she exclaimed. Wait, honey. I plan to spend that money on us, but we need a plan. We can blow it now or triple it in 2 years. Would you rather have $10 million in 2 years or $3.6 million now? I buy you a new Audi every year, and there's more to come. I did all this for you, I said. She smiled. Okay, you win. Later, I called Betty at the store to finalize a contingency plan. Betty, I'm transferring all store assets to you. If anything happens to me, it's yours. The purchase price is $5,000, but the corporation remains separate. Any tax problems will fall on it, not you. Questions? Yes. Why are you doing all of this for me? Kathy asked, her voice uncertain. You've been an incredible friend and business partner. You've done the heavy lifting while I stayed in the background. But there's a catch. One day, you might be contacted by Pete Stone. If that happens, do whatever he asks without discussing it with anyone, not even your husband. I promise you won't be asked to do anything illegal, just a favor. He saved my life more times than I can count. Do we understand? I asked. Kathy sighed. I understand, James. But I wish you wouldn't talk like that, it feels like bad luck. I'd rather you come back safe so we can continue working together, she said softly. That's my wish too, Kathy, but I wanted to make sure you're taken care of if anything happens to me, I replied. At home, Kathy vowed to be a more passionate wife, nearly setting our mattress ablaze with her efforts. Meanwhile, Mr. Leidick continued monitoring her activities but found nothing suspicious about her behavior. However, one detail stood out. Kathy regularly visited a luxury apartment building owned by Mark Silver, spending hours there. The following week, Kathy had a homebuilders seminar and convention, reserving the last 3 evenings for its events. She told me she'd be home late every night. I noticed the event materials on the kitchen table and asked about the formal dance mentioned for Saturday night. It's a big deal, she explained. A dress-up event. Best suit or tux for the men and little black dresses for the ladies. There'll be a live band and an open bar. I'll probably be home very late. It says spouses are invited. Do you mind if I go with you? I asked. You said I need to have more fun, and we haven't gone to a dance in ages. Kathy hesitated. You don't know anyone there, and I'll be busy networking and developing business relationships. You might end up sitting alone for hours, and you hate that without a computer, she said, her tone dismissive. Ignoring her remark, I responded, you've asked me to change, so I'm trying to be the kind of husband you want. I informed Mr. Leidick about the party, and he promised to install equipment to capture audio from Kathy's purse. He also provided me with a microphone disguised as a pocket square that I could activate with a subtle hand swipe. The first 2 nights of the convention went smoothly. Kathy returned home late but didn't act out of the ordinary. She skipped her usual post-work shower and snuggled up next to me, whispering a sleepy goodnight. On Saturday, I dressed in my best suit and waited for Kathy in the living room. When she descended the stairs, she took my breath away. Her sleek black dress clung perfectly, and her hair was styled with effortless elegance. You look amazing, my dear. That dress was made for you, I said. She smiled and insisted we take my newest Corvette to the event. The table reserved by her bank offered a prime view of the dance floor and catwalk. 2 couples were already seated when we arrived, and Kathy introduced me as her husband. One of the women laughed and said, Kathy, I thought you said your husband was a computer nerd. Who's this handsome stud? All eyes turned to Kathy for her response. With a tight smile, she replied, why don't you tell them about yourself, James? Share what you do in your work abroad. I kept my tone light. I own a computer store on Main Street and spend 3 months at a time overseas working on systems for the Army. I wouldn't call that nerdy, Kathy. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face at my gentle correction. Well, you'll always be my favorite nerd, she said, brushing it off. Now, go grab us some drinks while I socialize. I made my way to the drink line, which stretched out long enough to delay me. In front of me, 2 realtor women chatted loudly. The taller one whispered, there she is, the most beautiful loan officer in town. Look at that blue dress. She's working overtime to lock down funding for Liam's new high-rise. The shorter woman added, and doing most of it at night. Did you see the rock on her finger? She says her husband is a computer geek who's gone a lot, but maybe he doesn't mind her business development efforts. They reached the bar before I could hear more. Returning to the table, I noticed Kathy surrounded by 4 men, all circling her like wolves. I squeezed into the group, handing her a glass of wine. She looked surprised and slightly annoyed at my interruption. Introducing me half-heartedly, she said, this is James, my husband. I shook hands with Mark Silver, who barely looked at me. Nice to meet you, Mr. Silver, I said. I hear you're the real estate man in town. He gave me a reluctant smile. Your wife mentioned you're a shrewd investor, he added. Did she? I replied, shooting Kathy a pointed look. I didn't realize she shared my investment strategies. Kathy busied herself adjusting a thread on her dress. Silver chuckled awkwardly. She only said she was impressed by the size of your portfolio. My jaw tightened. Well, I'll have to guard my financial details better. I expect her to do the same with mine. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Silver, but I'd like to dance with my wife now. I grabbed Kathy's hand and led her to the dance floor, whispering through clenched teeth, "Calm down, or you'll ruin both your marriage and career. Take 3 deep breaths, wait 60 seconds, then smile. Be professional." To my surprise, she followed my advice. "I didn't like how you confronted me," she admitted. "Don't share details about my wealth," I replied. "I don't trust anyone, not even you." Shocked, she asked, "Do you really mean that?" I met her gaze. "How often do I lie to you? How often do you lie to me?" She looked stunned. "I've never caught you lying," she said, avoiding the second question. As we returned to the table, one of the men tapped my shoulder. "Mind if I dance with your wife?" he asked. "Sorry, but tonight is special." "We won't be dancing with anyone else," I replied, holding firm. After a few more songs, I turned to Kathy. "I'm done here. Are you coming home with me or staying?" I asked. She hesitated. "This is my job, James. There are people I need to spend time with. Your decision. But if you stay, figure out how to get home." "I love you, but tonight I'm going home," I said, kissing her engagement ring before leaving. Mr. Leidick's microphone was already collecting data from her purse. The next morning, I texted him, letting him know Kathy was still at the Grand Meridian Hotel. She didn't come home until almost noon, arriving in an Uber. Her dress was wrinkled, and her expression was a mix of exhaustion and forced cheerfulness. She kissed my cheek and said, "Thank you for being my husband." Then, without another word, she disappeared upstairs to shower. I wondered since when Grand Meridian hotel rooms lacked showers but kept quiet when Kathy said, "I'd like coffee and toast, then I'm going to bed if you don't mind." Placing her favorite jam on a slice of toast, I asked, "What did you do after I left the dance?" She chewed slowly before answering, "I danced with Jeremy Thompson, the man you refused to dance with. He said you seemed nice. After that, I spoke to 20 or 30 people, making sure they knew I valued them." She didn't mention whether she returned to her room, someone else's, or even where she had breakfast. I decided I'd get the truth from Mr. Leidick. We met in his office at 10 a.m. Monday. Offering me coffee, which I declined in favor of water, he said, "If you don't mind, James, I'll outline the findings in order, starting from day 1. I nodded. Using Kathy's cell phone locator, we tracked her having lunch at Mark Silver's high-rise. Later, she went to the 14th floor, where Jeremy Thompson has his office, a subsidiary of Silver's real estate company. We don't have recordings from those meetings yet, but here's a summary of the last 3 days' findings. He continued, "Kathy told Thompson over the phone that she was disappointed in your participation at the convention and would have rather spent the night with him, dancing, eating, and making love. She planned to pretend to be drunk so she'd have an excuse not to drive home. When Thompson insulted you, she cut him off, reminding him you're her husband and emphasizing that she's only using him for business connections. In another call, she told Thompson, 'I've decided. You need $3 million for the new condo, and I can get the money from James by selling him on the idea of investing. He probably has more stashed away.' Thompson asked, 'Where'd that nerd get all that money?' She replied, 'If he has $3 million, that's $3 million more than you have.' She suggested delaying any divorce plans until she determined how much money you control. 'It might be better to stay married and keep access to his funds than settle for half,' she said. I clenched my jaw as Mr. Leidick continued. 'At the convention, she told Silver you could fund the mall's equity stake. After you left the dance, she invited Thompson to dance, cautioning, "James might have someone watching us, so this will be our only dance tonight." She later told him she'd book a room and call after midnight. Mr. Murray, I'm not going to replay their conversations after midnight. It's not something any husband should hear. However, the recordings are available if you need them. I'll retain the files in case you want to reconcile, but I recommend not listening unless absolutely necessary. Shall we continue surveillance? I took a deep breath before replying. Yes. Continue surveillance for 2 more weeks, then stop. I'll listen to the recordings if I feel it's necessary. Thank you, Mr. Leidick, for helping me stay focused on my future. Back home, I closed all my IRAs and took the tax hit. As James Murray, I paid the penalties, knowing I'd soon leave that identity behind. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance to the Wounded Warriors Project, maxed out joint credit cards to buy Krugerrands, and traded my Corvette for Bitcoin. I signed over power of attorney to Pete Stone, emptied my safe deposit box, and moved funds from Swiss and Cayman accounts into new ones. In the weapon safe, I left a box of $1,000 and $20 bills rigged with tear gas, bait money for Kathy if she tried anything. I also left a combination conspicuously written on a note. Kathy subtly tried convincing me to invest in Silver's mall project, presenting it as a great opportunity. I told her to prepare a full analysis, a task to keep her busy while I finalized my plans. Meanwhile, I contacted a Marana realtor and secured a 4,000-square-foot Adobe-style home with mountain views, a pool, and a golf course for $3 million in cash. I felt no love for Kathy anymore, only a burning need for revenge. To keep her unaware, I told Kathy I had a work trip to DC but instead flew to Tucson to finalize my new life. Unsurprisingly, she didn't offer to drive me to the airport. Likely, she was relieved to see me leave for her lover. In Tucson, I opened new bank accounts under my Pete Stone identity, transferring $4 million into them. The house was perfect, and the realtor agreed to store personal items securely. Monitoring the house in Indiana via motion-activated cameras, I saw no signs of a lover visiting. Kathy was working on a shopping center proposal for me, unknowingly aiding my exit strategy. When I returned to Indianapolis, Kathy greeted me at the airport in her Audi. "Welcome home, my wonderful husband. I've missed you," she said, her smile warm but hollow. "Yes, it's been a long trip," I replied, masking my indifference. Early the next morning, I left the house quietly, not wanting to see or speak to her. Mr. Leidick greeted me with updates. We recorded Kathy visiting Silver's building again, meeting first with Thompson and then with Silver. "They discussed using your money for the mall and their projects," he said. "Liam, another real estate figure in their circle, is successful but strapped for cash. He needs funds to avoid defaulting on loans, which would jeopardize his empire and, in turn, Kathy's career." Leidick paused, handing me a video. "This part is unpleasant, James. It's more than you need to see." Watching the footage was painful, but I forced myself through it. That evening, Kathy prepared dinner and presented her prospectus. "Would you like to review my proposal tonight?" she asked, setting a glass of whiskey in front of me. "Yes," I replied, feigning interest. "Would you prefer to present it or just have me read it?" She smiled. "Let me get comfortable first." Her analysis was thorough, highlighting low debt-to-equity ratios and solid net rental income. However, I knew the anchor tenant was considering closing stores, a move that would devastate revenues. She added, "Silver needs cash for a luxury condo project. This is a rare opportunity for us with great monthly cash flow and accelerated amortization." Feigning interest, I said, "Let me review the numbers tomorrow. I might want to invest more than $3 million. Is that possible?" Kathy lit up with excitement. "Of course. That would be perfect," she exclaimed. The next morning, I called her. "Would you mind if I showed this to my overseas associates? It could help secure a better deal." Thinking I was serious, she encouraged it. "Yes, please show it to them." I hung up and muttered, "Better for us? Define us. Is it me and you, or you and your lovers?" After packing valuables into a rented Cadillac Escalade, I told Kathy I was flying to Tucson to meet potential investors. She asked eagerly, "How much money do you think you can raise?" I replied, "I might risk another $2 million, making it $5 million total. Other participants could add $5 million more." She squealed with delight. "That's perfect, James. Just perfect." I hung up, satisfied that the final pieces of my escape were falling into place. I booked a hotel room in Wichita to rest during the long drive to Marana. Wanting to avoid any issues, I hired a local security company to monitor my car overnight. To maintain the illusion of continuity, I had already purchased a weapon safe identical to the one in Indianapolis and arranged for its delivery to Pete Stone's new house. With SiriusXM playing constantly in the background, the journey felt smooth and uneventful. Arriving at my new home brought a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. I set up the essentials and allowed myself a moment to enjoy the quiet. It was liberating to be so far removed from Kathy's schemes. After settling in and gathering the necessities for the house, I returned to Indianapolis a week later. Kathy greeted me warmly, and I told her I'd secured a $10 million package from myself and my business partners. Over the next 2 weeks, I busied myself setting up an LLC and spent 3 more preparing and negotiating the supposed investment documents. This, of course, was a ruse to stall until Liam's finances hit rock bottom. One morning, before Kathy left for work, I decided to test the waters. "We're almost done with the paperwork," I told her. "We could sign as early as this week, but the funds won't transfer to the bank until everything is finalized. I think we should talk about our future, though. You've been working so hard for others. I think it's time to focus on us, our investments, and maybe even starting a family. What do you think?" Kathy's eyes sparkled, and she smiled. "I like that idea, James. It sounds wonderful. Thank you for thinking about us," she said, kissing me softly before leaving the house, clearly in high spirits. Later that day, I learned she had gone straight to Liam's office to share the news, celebrating with both him and Thompson. Her excitement about the investment was palpable, but it only fueled my resolve to see my plan through. The following week, I signed the final papers at Silver's office. Everyone in the room congratulated one another, Thompson and Silver smirking like they'd just won the lottery. Liam turned to me and asked, "When's the money coming?" I gave him a polite smile. "The funds will transfer directly from my Swiss account to your bank in a single transaction." "It won't be long," I assured him. The day after signing, I left for North Africa, ensuring the supposed transfer would take place while I was conveniently out of reach. The last trace of James Murray was a passport stamp at Indianapolis International Airport. Once back at the compound, I logged into the security cameras at home. Kathy was lying in bed with Thompson. Fury burned in my chest, but instead of acting rashly, I channeled my anger into controlled chaos. From my tablet, I triggered the fire alarm system in the house. Sirens blared as Kathy and Thompson scrambled out of bed. The fire department spent over an hour inspecting the property, finding no cause for the alarm. For the next few days, Kathy and I kept missing each other on FaceTime. Finally, when we connected, her tone was icy. "When is the money coming?" "It's been over a week since we signed the documents," she snapped. I chuckled. "The money is ready in my account, but the banks here are closed. I'll transfer it tomorrow when they open." "Anything else?" I asked nonchalantly. "No, just work," she said, her irritation evident. "I'm busy, so I've got to go." "Love you." "Yeah, me too." "Bye," I replied curtly. That night, I staged the death of James Murray. From my tablet, I activated one of the fire alarm's emergency lights, switching it to strobe mode. Then, through a speaker in the living room, I projected a distorted voice. "Kathy. Help me. They're eliminating me. Please, Kathy, I love you." I shouted. The strobe lights flickered, and I abruptly cut the sound, plunging the house into silence. Kathy's screams echoed through the house as she ran, crying hysterically. She grabbed her phone and called Thompson. "Jeremy. Something's wrong. I've completely lost it. James was being liquidated. I heard him calling for me. It wasn't a dream, I was awake. Please, come over," she begged. Thompson sighed. "It was a dream, Kathy. Have a glass of wine or milk and go to bed," he said dismissively before hanging up. Kathy tried calling me, but I ignored her. I smashed James' phone into pieces, ensuring she had no way of contacting me, or anyone who could explain the disappearance of her $10 million. The collapse of Silver's empire was inevitable without those funds, taking Kathy's ambitions down with it. Through the cameras, I watched her crumble, sobbing on the living room floor. Her lifestyle, once fueled by my money, was unsustainable. Without me, the $1 million house she clung to become more of a burden than an asset. James Murray no longer existed. My CIA supervisor froze all records of my personnel file, citing insurgent threats to my family as the reason. Without proof of my death, Kathy would have to wait 7 years to declare me dead legally. She didn't have access to my offshore accounts, leaving her completely stranded financially. 3 weeks later, my Marine friends helped stage the final act. We draped 2 tables and a blue tarp outside the compound and staged a photo of my decapitated body. One Marine, dressed as an insurgent, posed holding my head, which was wrapped in the tarp with ketchup splattered around my neck. My face was dusted with chalk, my lips painted dark blue, and my hair streaked with salt to create a convincingly lifeless appearance. 2 Marines in dress uniforms knocked on Kathy's door. Thompson answered and tried to brush them off. We've already donated to the Salvation Army, he said, attempting to shut the door. One Marine blocked it with his boot. We're here to see Mrs. Adams, he said firmly. Kathy appeared moments later, pale and trembling. Is something wrong? She asked. The Marine handed her the staged photo. We believe your husband has been liquidated. This photo is our only means of identification, he explained. Kathy stared at the image before collapsing to her knees, sobbing. No. We were going to start a family. He told me he loved me the night he died, she wailed. Where are his remains? The Marine kept his voice steady. 30 bodies were bulldozed into a pit. The heads were left stacked outside the compound. We're sorry for your loss. Kathy vomited on the doorstep, crying uncontrollably. As the Marines walked away, Thompson's voice rang out. Where's the $10 million? What happened to the money? Without it, we're bankrupt. I laughed, watching the scene unfold through the camera. Kathy's life was in ruins. Her career was over, her reputation destroyed, and her dreams of a real estate empire reduced to ashes. From the safety of my new life as Pete Stone, I savored poetic justice.